What if you were invited to a grand family dinner, seated among 23 guests, only to realize your plate was the only one left empty? The humiliation of hearing, "I only ordered for family," still cuts like a knife. Have you ever faced cruelty like this, being excluded in plain sight? If you have, drop your story in the comments and tell me where you're watching from. Stay with me, because what happened next will leave you speechless. I am Nadia, 34 years old, and I never imagined one family dinner could shatter the illusion I had been holding on to. That night is burned into my memory like a scar. 23 guests sat at my mother-in-law Vivian's long, polished table. The chandeliers glowed, the silver gleamed, and servers glided gracefully with sizzling steaks plated like works of art. One by one, every guest received theirs, all but me. Before me sat nothing, just an empty plate that felt like a spotlight, exposing me as the outsider I had always feared I was. My aunt, unsettled by the obvious omission, asked softly, "Why hasn't Nadia been served?" Vivian's lips curved into the thinnest smile, her voice sweet but sharp enough to cut through the room. "I only ordered for family." The silence that followed was suffocating. Conversations died, forks froze, and all eyes turned toward me, waiting to see if I would shrink or speak. My pulse thundered in my ears, but I forced myself to hold steady. This was more than a dinner. This was a verdict. And in that moment, humiliated, furious, yet unwilling to break, I found my voice. If you're watching this, please like and subscribe. And tell me in the comments where you're tuning in from. Because tonight I'm sharing what happened when I finally stood up to the woman who never considered me family. But before that infamous dinner, my story began years earlier, in a very different world. I grew up in Boston, in a modest but fiercely loving home. My father spent 3 decades behind the wheel of a delivery truck. My mother worked as a school secretary. They gave everything they had so that I could be the first in our family to earn a college degree. I juggled shifts, took out loans, and fought for every inch of progress until I finally earned my master's in speech therapy. By the time I met Derek, I had built a life that was humble but mine, rooted in determination, hard work, and the joy of helping children find their voices. I didn't know then how meeting him at a wedding would change everything. Each answer seemed to disappoint her, though she maintained a veneer of politeness. She mentioned Derek's ex-girlfriend Julia several times, noting her family's vacation home in Martha's Vineyard and her father's position as a hospital director. Julia and Derek made such a handsome couple at the Prescott Charity Gala, she reminisced, showing me a photo on her phone. Her mother and I were on the committee together. Such a shame things didn't work out. Derek seemed oblivious to these subtle digs. He adored his mother and could not see past her polished exterior. Whenever I gently mentioned her behavior later, he would defend her intentions. "Mom is just protective," he would say. "She wants to make sure I am happy. Give her time, she will warm up to you." Time, unfortunately, only seemed to make things worse. Derek's sister Elaine initially appeared friendly, complimenting my earrings or asking about my work, but there was an underlying competitiveness in her interactions, constantly mentioning her own achievements or subtly correcting my etiquette mistakes at family gatherings. Derek's brother, Michael, and his wife Stephanie maintained a polite distance. They were cordial, but never warm, following Vivian's lead in keeping me at arm's length. I later learned that Stephanie had endured similar treatment when she first joined the family, but eventually won approval by working at Williams' firm and adapting to their lifestyle. I tried everything to win Vivian's approval. I brought thoughtful gifts to family gatherings, researched topics she was interested in, offered to help with her charity events. Each effort was either forgotten or dismissed. The crystal vase I gave her for her birthday somehow never made it out of its box. My offer to help with her annual charity auction was declined because the committee is already set. The only relative who showed me genuine kindness was my Aunt Margot, my mother's sister, who lived in my Aunt Margot, Connecticut, not far from Derek's family. Margot was my anchor, providing perspective and support when I felt like I was drowning in Vivian's subtle hostility. Unlike my parents, who lived in Arizona now, Margot could attend family functions and witness the dynamics firsthand. When the invitation arrived for Vivian's annual family dinner, celebrating William's retirement, I approached it with both hope and dread. The embossed card specified black tie attire and a 7-course meal prepared by a renowned chef. Margot had also been invited, which was unusual but gave me some comfort. I later learned that William and Margot had been friends in college, something Vivian was not pleased about, but tolerated because of William's insistence. "This is a important night," Derek told me as we prepared for the event. "Dad is finally stepping back from the firm, and Mom has been planning this dinner for months. Everyone will be there, the whole extended family." I nodded, selecting a conservative black dress that I hoped would meet Vivian's exacting standards. "I know I will do everything I can to make sure it goes perfectly. If only I had known then how that night would unfold, and how it would change everything." The evening of William's retirement celebration arrived with a perfect presented retirement. October chill in the air. Derek and I pulled up to his parents' colonial mansion in our Audi, joining the line of luxury vehicles in the circular driveway. The house was illuminated like a picture from Architectural Digest, with tasteful landscape lighting highlighting the manicured gardens and stone facade. "You look beautiful," Derek said, squeezing my hand before we walked to the imposing front door. I had spent hours preparing, wearing the black dress I had saved 3 months to afford with. My hair professionally styled and makeup carefully applied to look elegant but not overdone. Vivian greeted us at the door herself, bypassing the hired staff, who took coats and directed other guests. She embraced Derek warmly, holding him tight and exclaiming how handsome he looked in his tuxedo. When she turned to me, her smile cooled noticeably. She offered a brief air kiss near my cheek, careful not to actually make contact. "Nadia, you made it," she said, as though my attendance had been uncertain. She made no comment about my appearance before turning to welcome the guests behind us. The grand foyer opened to several elegantly decorated rooms filled with about 40 people in formal attire. Crystal chandeliers cast a warm glow over the proceedings, and staff in black and white uniforms circulated with trays of champagne and hors d'oeuvres. A string quartet played softly in the corner of the main salon. I recognized many faces from previous family gatherings. William's brother and his wife, Derek's cousins from Boston, several partners from the firm. Vivian's sister Charlotte held court near the fireplace, gesturing dramatically as she spoke to an attentive audience. As Derek led me through the rooms, stopping to greet relatives and friends, I noticed the family photographs arranged on tables and walls. There were professional portraits of Derek and his siblings as children, candid shots from family vacations, and several of William and Vivian at various social functions. I searched but could not find a single photo from our wedding, though there were recent pictures of both Michael and Elaine with their spouses. "Derek, come. Here, son," William called from across the room. Derek squeezed my hand apologetically before heading over to join his father and several older men I recognized as senior partners at the firm. Left on my own, I wandered toward the dining room, admiring the elaborate table setting visible through the doorway. The long mahogany table was set for 23 with fine china crystal stemware and silver flatware arranged with mathematical precision. Name cards in elegant calligraphy marked each place setting. "Quite the production, is it not?" a familiar voice said behind me. I turned to find my Aunt Margot, elegant in a deep blue gown, her silver hair styled in her signature bob. "Margot," I embraced her, genuinely relieved to see a friendly face. "I did not know you would be here." "William and I go way back," she said with a wink. "College friends. Vivian knows this, but conveniently forgets whenever possible. William made sure I was included tonight." As we chatted, a server approached with a tray of champagne flutes. He offered one to Margot but moved to walk past me without stopping. I had to reach out and ask, "May I have one as well, please?" The server looked momentarily confused, then nodded and allowed me to take a glass. As he walked away, I noticed Vivian watching the interaction from across the room, her lips pressed into a thin line. "Do not let her get to you," Margot whispered, following my gaze. "That is exactly what Maine she wants." Throughout the next hour, I noticed similar small exclusions. Servers consistently overlooked me when offering canapés. When Elaine showed Everyone her new diamond bracelet, a gift from her husband Vivian, suggested. It was exactly the kind of quality piece that comes from good breeding and taste. While glancing pointedly at my modest jewelry, the most obvious slight came when Vivian circulated through the room, personally refilling wine glasses. She topped off everyone's drink, engaging in brief conversation with each guest. When she reached Margot and me, she refreshed Margot's glass while asking about her recent trip to France. Then, without acknowledging me, she turned to move away. As she did, her elbow accidentally bumped my arm, causing red wine to splash onto my black dress. "Oh dear," she said without real concern. "You should go to the powder room and take care of that." Down the hall second door. In the bathroom, I dabbed at the stain with a damp towel, fighting back tears of frustration. Through the vent, I could hear voices from the adjacent room, which I realized was Vivian's study. "She is trying so hard. It is painful to watch," Vivian's voice said. "That dress is clearly off the rack. And those shoes with that handbag." "Mom, be nice," Elaine's voice replied. "Though," she was laughing. "Derek seems happy." "For now," Vivian said, Julia called last. "Weak, still single. I have always thought they would find their way back to each other eventually." I froze. The damp towel pressed against my dress. Derek had dated Julia for 3 years. Before meeting me, they had broken up because, according to Derek, they wanted different things in life. I had no idea they were still in contact, much less that Vivian was actively keeping those lines of communication open. When I returned to the party, Derek was deep in conversation with his father about the transition of leadership at the firm. I barely noticed my return, nodding absently when I touched his arm. The strain of maintaining a pleasant expression while feeling increasingly unwelcome was becoming exhausting. Finally, Vivienne announced that dinner would be served. Guests began moving toward the dining room, searching for their assigned seats. I checked each elegantly written name card, but could not find mine anywhere along the table. "Derek," I whispered. "I do not see my place card." He looked surprised, then shrugged. "Probably just an oversight. Here you can sit between me and Margot." He casually pulled up an additional chair, disrupting the careful spacing of the place settings. The chair, he added, had no charger plate, no crystal glasses, none of the elaborate place setting that everyone else had. Vivian noticed immediately. "Derek, we had the seating arranged very specifically," she said, her voice tight. "It is fine, Mom. Nadia can sit here." As everyone settled into their seats, I felt Vivian's disapproving glances each time I spoke. When I answered William's polite question about my work with a story about a young client's breakthrough, Vivian interrupted to ask Michael's wife about their recent vacation, effectively cutting me off. Mid-sentence, the tension was building, but I had no idea how much worse things were about to get. The dining room glowed with the light of dozens of candles and the antique crystal chandelier overhead. Fine china gleamed against the dark mahogany table, each place setting accompanied by an array of silverware that made me silently thank Margot for the crash course in formal dining etiquette she had given me months ago. Floral arrangements of white roses and hydrangeas created a sophisticated centerpiece running the length of the table. Once everyone was seated, servers appeared from the kitchen in choreographed precision. The head server announced the first course, a delicate lobster bisque with truffle oil as white porcelain bowls were placed before each guest. Each guest except me. I sat awkwardly as everyone around me received their appetizer. Derek was engaged in conversation with his brother about quarterly projections for the firm and did not immediately notice. Margot, however, did. "Excuse me," she said to a passing server. "My niece did not receive the first course." The server looked uncomfortable and glanced toward Vivian, who smiled placidly from the head of the table. "I believe we are one setting short," Vivian said, the chef. "Prepared exactly enough for the invited guests. Perhaps you could share with Derek." Nadia. The implication was clear. I had not been included in the original count because I had not really been invited, merely tolerated as Derek's plus one. Derek finally noticed the situation and frowned slightly. "Mom, could the kitchen prepare another portion?" The bisque is quite complex, dear. It was prepared in exact quantities. I am sure Nadia understands. Her tone suggested that making an issue of it would be terribly unsophisticated. Derek hesitated, then pushed his bowl slightly toward me. We can share, he said quietly before returning to his conversation with Michael. I took a small spoonful of the bisque, my appetite diminishing with each passing moment. Around the table, conversation flowed about investments, recent vacations, and Elaine's daughter's acceptance to an exclusive private school. I remained silent, feeling increasingly invisible, when the second course arrived, a small plate of scallops with a beurre blanc sauce. The pattern repeated. Everyone received a serving except me. This time I did not bother to point it out, and neither did Derek. He absently offered me one of his scallops while discussing the merits of European versus American business schools with his cousin. By the third course, a palate cleansing sorbet, I noticed several guests casting uncomfortable glances in my direction as I sat with an empty place before me. William appeared, confused but said nothing, deferring to his wife's management of the dinner as if he had presumably done for decades. Then came the main course. Servers entered, carrying silver trays with sizzling prime ribeye steaks, perfectly cooked to each guest's preference, accompanied by roasted vegetables and truffle mashed potatoes. The aroma filled the room and appreciative murmurs rippled around the table. A server placed plates before each person until he reached me. Instead of the steak everyone else received, he set down a small plain garden salad with no dressing. The contrast between my sparse plate and the elaborate meals surrounding me could not have been more stark. Margot set down her fork with a sharp clink against her plate. Vivian, why does Nadia have a salad when everyone else has steak? The table fell. Quiet conversations pausing as attention turned to our end of the table. Vivian's smile remained fixed, but her eyes hardened. I only ordered for family, she said, her voice honey-sweet but laced with venom. The steaks were quite founded Jews. Expensive, flown in from Japan. I am sure Nadia appreciates something lighter anyway. The silence that followed was deafening. I could feel every eye on me waiting for my reaction. Next to me, Derek continued cutting his steak, his eyes fixed firmly on his plate. Am I family or not? I asked him quietly. Derek glanced up, his expression pained. Do not do this. Not here, he muttered, still chewing. That was when something inside me broke. 2 years of slight exclusions and pretending not to notice crashed down on me at once. I had endured Vivian's passive-aggressive behavior for Derek's sake, believing that eventually she would accept me. But, sitting there with a plain salad while everyone else enjoyed premium steak, I realized nothing would ever change unless I made it change. As dessert was served, elaborate individual chocolate soufflés rising majestically from ramekins, I once again received nothing, not even a mint or a cookie, just an empty space where my dessert should have been. I watched as everyone at the table savored their soufflés, making appreciative noises and complimenting Vivian on the menu. Derek was so absorbed in his dessert that he did not offer to share, did not even seem to notice that. I sat beside him with nothing. My hands trembled slightly in my lap as I gathered my courage. Margot sensed my resolve and squeezed my hand under the Bratters' table, a silent gesture of support that gave me the final push I needed. I had spent 2 years trying to fit into a family that had no intention of making room for me. 2 years of shrinking in myself, accepting disrespect, and pretending not to notice the 1,000 paper cuts to my dignity. As I looked around at the family laughing and enjoying their meal while I sat excluded, I knew this moment would define our future. I could stay silent and accept my place as an outsider forever, or I could stand up for myself, whatever the consequences. I chose to stand up. Actually, I said, my voice surprisingly steady despite my racing heart, I would like to address something. The conversations around the table gradually quieted as I realized I was speaking. Derek tensed beside me, his fork pausing midway to his mouth. Nadia, he whispered. Not now. But I continued my gaze fixed on Vivian, at the head of the table. For 2 years I have tried to be part of this family. I have overlooked the slights, excused the accidental exclusions, and accepted being treated as less than, but tonight has made something very clear that I can no longer ignore. Vivian's smile remained fixed, though her knuckles whitened around her dessert spoon. I am not sure what you mean, dear. This is hardly the time for whatever grievance you have invented. Invented, I repeated, maintaining my composure. Let me be specific then. Tonight, I was the only person not given a place card. I was the only one servers consistently overlooked for drinks and appetizers. I received a plain salad while everyone else enjoyed steak and now no dessert. I looked around the table, meeting the eyes of each family member. Some looked away uncomfortably, others appeared surprised, as if they had not noticed the pattern until I pointed it out. But this is not just about tonight, I continued. It is about the Christmas gift exchange where everyone received a present except me because I was not on the family list. It is about the family. Vacation photos where I was asked to step aside so you could get just the family. It is about my wedding picture being the only one absent from your family photo wall. William frowned, looking genuinely confused. Vivienne, is this true? Before Vivienne could respond, Margot spoke up. It is all true. William, I have witnessed it myself numerous times. This is ridiculous, Vivienne said, her voice rising slightly. Nadia has always been overly sensitive. We have done nothing but welcome her into our home. Welcome me, I echoed, in disbelief. You have systematically excluded me from day one. You compare me unfavorably to Julia at every opportunity. You forget to include me in family events. You dismiss my career, my background, everything about me. Derek finally found his voice. Nadia, you are embarrassing yourself and my family. This is my father's retirement dinner. His words stung worse than anything Vivian had ever done. Your family, I repeated. After 2 years of marriage, I am still not part of your family in your mind. That is not what I meant. Derek backpedaled, looking around at the uncomfortable faces of his relatives. Is it not? I reached into my purse and pulled out my phone. 3 weeks ago, you and your mother exchanged texts about me. Would you like me to read them to everyone? Derek's face drained of color. You went through my phone. I did not have to. You left it open on the nightstand when you went to shower. The notification from Mom caught my eye. I scrolled to the saved screenshot. Your mother wrote, and I quote, Nadia looked completely out of place at the club fundraiser. Could you not have at least helped her select appropriate attire? Julia always understood these events, and you replied, I know, Mom. Sometimes I wonder if she will ever fit in with us. Gasps and murmurs rippled as around the table. Elaine looked down at her plate. Michael and Stephanie exchanged glances. You never defended me, I said to Derek, my voice finally cracking with emotion. Not once in 2 years have you stood up to your mother when she belittled me. How dare you? Vivian hissed, abandoning her poised facade. Derek has given you a life you never could have achieved on your own. A nobody from a nothing family, and this is your gratitude, Mother Elaine, exclaimed, shocked at the naked hostility. William stood up, his napkin falling to the floor. Vivian, that is. Enough. No, William, it is not enough. Vivian continued her carefully constructed image crumbling. She has never been good enough for our son, and everyone in this room knows it. I have merely been the only one with the courage to acknowledge it. Derek looked torn, his gaze moving between his mother and me. Mom, please stop. Choose Derek, Vivian demanded. Right now, your family or her. The silence that followed her ultimatum was absolute. 22 pairs of eyes moved to Derek, waiting for his response. I held my breath, part of me still hoping against all evidence that he would finally choose me. Derek swallowed hard, looking at his mother, then at me, then down at his half-eaten Sully. His silence was answer enough. I stood up slowly, placing my napkin beside my empty plate. Thank you for making this so clear, both of you. I will not stay where I am not wanted or respected. Dignity was all I had left, and I clung to it as I walked out of the dining room. No one called after me, no one followed, not even Derek. In the foyer, I collected my coat from the confused staff member and stepped out into the cool October night. Tears. Threatened, but I refused to shed them on Vivian's property. I made it to my car, before I heard footsteps behind me. Nadia, wait! It was Margot, not Derek. I need to go, I said, fumbling with my keys. I know, sweetheart, but you should not drive upset. Let me take you home. I can manage, I insisted, though. My hands were shaking. Then I will follow you to make sure you get there safely, Margot, said firmly. And Nadia, I am proud of you. What you did in there took tremendous courage. As I drove away from the mansion, I glanced in my rear view mirror. Margot's headlights were steady behind me, but there was no sign of Derek in the driveway. No sign that my husband had chosen to follow his wife instead of remaining with his mother. That told me everything I needed to know. I arrived at our apartment building with Margot close behind. The doorman greeted me with his usual friendly smile, unaware that my world had just imploded. In the elevator, I leaned against the wall, suddenly exhausted. Do you want me to come up? Margot asked gently. I shook my head. I need some time alone, but thank you for being there tonight. Call me anytime, day or night, she insisted, hugging me tightly before the elevator doors opened to my floor. Inside our apartment, the silence was deafening. Photos of Derek and me from happier times seemed to mock me from the walls. Our wedding portrait, the one Vivian had never displayed, held center place above our fireplace. We looked so happy, so hopeful. That couple seemed like strangers now. Only when the door was locked behind me did I finally let the tears come. I sank to the floor, my back against the door, and sobbed until my throat was raw and my eyes burned. All the hurt, humiliation, and betrayal poured out in waves that left me gasping for breath. My phone buzzed relentlessly, calls from Derek, but I let them go to voicemail. When I finally listened to his messages, there was no apology, only anger. How could you embarrass my family like that? On tonight of all nights, my father's retirement dinner. Nadia, you need to call my mother and apologize. Immediately. The unfairness of his demand unleashed a fresh wave of tears. In what universe was I the one who owed an apology? Around midnight, I heard Derek's key in the lock. I had moved from the floor to the bedroom by then, sitting on our bed with a suitcase, half packed beside me. What are you doing? He demanded, seeing the suitcase. Packing, I said simply. I'm going to stay with Margot for a while. Do not be dramatic, he scoffed. Running away will not solve anything. I am not running away. I am removing myself from a situation where I am not respected or valued. Derek paced the room, running his hands through his hair in frustration. You humiliated my mother in front of our entire family. What did you expect would happen? What did I expect? I repeated incredulously. I expected my husband to defend me when his mother deliberately excluded and insulted me. I expected to be treated with basic human decency at a family dinner. My mother is particular about her events. You know that. Particular. I laughed bitterly. Derek, she served me a plain salad while everyone else got steak. She did not give me dessert. How can you possibly defend that? You are exaggerating as usual, he dismissed. If you had just quietly spoken to me after dinner instead of making a scene like all the other times I have quietly spoken to you about your mother's behavior, when has that ever changed anything? Derek sat heavily on the edge of the bed. You do not understand the pressure I am under. My father is retiring. The firm is transitioning. My mother has always done things a certain way. A certain way that deliberately excludes and humiliates. Your wife, I said flatly. She is having a hard time adjusting to changes in the family. If you would just try harder to fit in. Something in me snapped at those words. Try harder. I have done nothing but try for 2 years. I have changed how I dress, how I speak, what I talk about. I have attended every family function, joined committees, donated to charities I cannot afford. What more could I possibly do? You could start by apologizing to my mother. I zipped the suitcase closed with finality. I will not apologize for finally standing up for myself. As I moved toward the door, Derek blocked my path. If you leave now, you are choosing this conflict over our marriage. No, Derek, you already made that choice when you sat silently while your mother treated me like garbage. When you texted her, agreeing that I did not fit in. When you demanded I apologize instead of acknowledging how deeply I have been hurt. I pushed past him with my suitcase, but his next words stopped me cold. She warned me. You know, my mother said you would never truly fit into our world, that eventually you would show your true colors. I turned to face him one last time, and she warned me too in her way. She told me at our engagement dinner that your relationship with Julia ended because she did not support your career. Enough. But that was a lie, was it not? It ended because she finally got tired of your mother's treatment and your failure to stand up to her. Derek's shocked expression confirmed my suspicion. How did you know about that? I did not until just now, but it makes sense. Has your mother been in contact with Julia recently? Derek perhaps invited her to lunch. His silence was damning. That is what I thought, I said quietly. Goodbye, Derek. I spent that night on Margot's couch, alternating between tears and numbness. In the morning, Margot made coffee and sat beside me. What happens now? She asked, gently. I do not know, I admitted. Part of me wants to fight for my marriage, but a larger part is wondering if there is anything left worth fighting for. The next week passed in a blur. Derek called and texted, constantly, alternating between demands that I return home and apologies that never quite acknowledged the real issues. I maintained minimal contact, telling him I needed space to think. Then came unexpected allies. Michael called me privately, something he had never done before. Nadia, I want you to know that Stephanie and I support you, he said, awkwardly. What happened at that dinner was wrong. Mom has always been difficult, but this was beyond anything acceptable. Later that day, Stephanie texted me. When I first married, Michael Vivian treated me similarly. Not as extreme, but the same pattern. It took years and my joining the firm before she accepted me. Just wanted you to know you are not alone or crazy. What she did was cruel. Even more surprising, was Elaine showing up at Margot's apartment unannounced. I should have said something that night, she admitted, looking genuinely remorseful. I have watched Mom treat you poorly for 2 years and said nothing. I was afraid of becoming her next target. Has she always been like this? I asked. Elaine nodded. With anyone she perceives as a threat to her control over the family. Yes, Dad has enabled it for decades. Michael and I learned to navigate it. Derek was always her favorite, so he never had to. The most awkward interaction came when William called me directly. Nadia, this is William, he said formally. I want to apologize for what happened at our home. I had no idea the extent of laughter. Well, I should have been more observant, more involved. Thank you, I said, surprised by his call. Vivian and I are discussing this situation, he continued. I want you to know that I consider you family, regardless of how poorly that was demonstrated. While these unexpected supports helped, Derek's behavior grew more concerning. He seemed to swing between contrition and anger, never fully acknowledging the fundamental problem. 2 weeks after the dinner, he delivered an ultimatum of his own. Either you come home and make peace with my mother, or we need to rethink our marriage. That same day, I received a certified letter from a lawyer representing Vivian Harrington, claiming I had borrowed and failed to return several items of jewelry from her home. It was a blatant lie and an obvious attempt at intimidation. That evening, I called Lauren, a colleague who had become a close friend. She listened to the whole story without interruption. Nadia, what you are describing is a toxic family system. She said finally. Derek is deeply inshed with his mother. He may love you, but he has been conditioned his entire life to prioritize her approval above all else. So, what do I do? First, document everything. Every text, email, the lawyer's letter. And second, I think you should consult with a divorce attorney, even if just to understand your options. The word divorce hit me like a physical blow. Despite everything, I had not allowed myself to think that far ahead. But Lauren was right. I needed to protect myself. 2 days later, I had a consultation with a family law attorney who specialized in high-conflict divorces. She reviewed my situation and helped me understand what a separation or divorce might entail. I did not make any decisions, but knowledge was power. That evening, my phone rang with Derek's number. I almost sent it to voicemail, but decided to answer. "Can we meet?" he asked, his voice subdued. "Just to talk, neutral ground." After a moment's hesitation, I agreed. "The coffee shop near Margot's apartment tomorrow at 10 o'clock. I will be there," he promised. I hung up, wondering if this meeting would provide closure or a new beginning. Either way, I was no longer the same. The woman who had sat silently accepting disrespect at Vivian's table, that Nadia was gone forever. The coffee shop was busy with the Saturday morning rush when I arrived 5 minutes early for my meeting with Derek. I chose a table in the bold corner, partially screened by a large potted plant that offered some privacy, without complete isolation. My hands cradled a ceramic mug of black coffee that I had barely tasted, my stomach too, knotted with anxiety to accommodate even caffeine. When Derek walked in, I almost did not recognize him. In just 3 weeks, he seemed to have aged years. His usually impeccable appearance was slightly rumpled, his hair less perfectly styled, dark circles prominent under his eyes. He spotted me immediately and made his way over carrying his own coffee. "Thank you for meeting me," he said formally, as if we were business associates rather than husband and wife. "You wanted to talk," I replied, keeping my voice neutral. "So, talk." Derek took a deep breath, seeming to gather his thoughts. "I have been doing a lot of thinking these past weeks, and I realize I owe you an apology. The way things happened at the dinner was inappropriate." I raised an eyebrow. "Inappropriate? Is that really the word you want to use for what happened?" He shifted uncomfortably. "Nadia, I am trying here. Are you? Because it sounds like you are minimizing what happened. Your mother deliberately excluded and humiliated me and you let her. Then you demanded I apologize to her." "I know," he said, his voice dropping. "I know how that sounds now. At the time, I was just reacting the way I always have. Mom gets upset. We all scramble to smooth things over, even when she is completely in the wrong. Especially then," he admitted quietly. "It has always been easier to plate her than confront her." I pulled a folder from my bag and placed it on the table between us. "I brought something I want you to see." "What is this evidence?" I said. "Simply, open it." Inside were printouts of text exchanges, emails, photos, documenting 2 years of systematic exclusion and undermining by Vivan, all organized chronologically with dates and brief explanations. Derek flipped through the pages slowly, his expression growing more troubled with each one. "You kept all of this, not intentionally at first, but after a while, I started documenting things because you always dismissed my concerns. I needed to prove to myself I was not imagining it." He paused at a screenshot of his text exchange with Vivian about me not fitting in. "I remember this. I was angry that night, frustrated that things were always so tense between you and Mom. I should never have said that." "No, you should not have," I agreed. "But what hurts more is that you never stood up for me. Not once in all these incidents." The waitress approached our table to refill our coffees. "Everything okay over here?" she asked, perhaps sensing the tension. "Fine, thank you," Derek replied, automatically. After she moved away, he leaned forward. "Nadia, I want to tell you something that happened after you left the dinner." I steeled myself. "Go ahead." "After you walked out, there was this horrible silence. Then Aunt Charlotte started saying you were overreacting and Mom began crying about how disrespectful you were. But Dad stood up and said, 'Enough, Vivian. What you did tonight was cruel and deliberate, and I will not pretend otherwise.'" I blinked in surprise. William had always been so passive in the face of Vivian's behavior. He told everyone at the table that he had watched for years, as Mom controlled who was in and who was out of the family, and that he had been a coward for allowing it. He said he was ashamed of her behavior and mine. "Yours." Derek nodded. He took me aside afterward and said something I cannot stop thinking about. He said, I failed to protect your mother from her worst instincts, and now you are failing to protect your wife. Do not make my mistake, son. It leads to a half-lived life. I sat back, processing this information. What did you say? Nothing. At first, I was still defending Mom out of habit. But then Dad showed me something. Derek pulled out his phone and scrolled to find a photo. He handed me his phone. On the screen was a picture I had never seen before of William and a young woman at what appeared to be a college formal dance. That is Dad and Margot, Derek explained. They dated seriously in college. Dad was going to propose, but his parents disapproved. Margot came from a middle-class background, worked her way through school. Sound familiar? What happened? His parents pressured him to break it off and introduced him to Mom, who came from the right kind of family. Dad chose the path of least resistance. He told me he has regretted it his entire life. I handed the phone back, unsure what to say. The point is, Derek continued, I saw myself making the same mistake, and the thought of a lifetime of regret terrified me. So, what are you saying? Exactly? I am saying I was wrong about everything. The way I let Mom treat you, the way I failed to stand up for you, the way I prioritized keeping the peace over protecting the person I love most in the world. For the first time in our conversation, I felt a tiny crack in the wall I had built around my heart. Words are easy, Derek. What about actions? That is why I am here. I want to go to couples counseling. I want to learn how to be the husband you deserve. And I have already told Mom that our relationship cannot continue as it has been. How did she take that? Not well, he admitted with a wry smile. There were tears, accusations, the works, but I held firm. I told her that if she wants me in her life, she has to respect you and our marriage. And if she cannot do that, then we will have limited contact with her. I am not willing to lose you, Nadia. These weeks apart have been the worst of my life. I wanted to believe him, but there was still one thing bothering me. What about Julia? Derek looked genuinely confused. What about her? Your mother has been meeting with her. Are you in contact with her, too? No, he said firmly. I had no idea Mom was seeing her until you mentioned it that night. I called Julia afterward to ask about it. Turns out Mom has been trying to orchestrate some accidental meeting between us for months. Julia only went along with it because Mom told her our marriage was on the rocks. And was that the first time you have spoken to her since we have been together? Yes, he insisted. Julia and I did not work for good reasons, and we both moved on. She actually told me to fix things with you because I seemed happier than she had ever seen me when we were together. The waitress returned this time with a concerned expression. Sorry to interrupt, but I could not help overhearing a bit. My mother-in-law was the same way. She placed 2 slices of cake on our table on the house. Sometimes sweet things help bitter conversations. After she left, Derek and I both laughed softly, breaking some of the tension. I am not saying one conversation fixes everything, Derek said. I know I have a lot to prove to you, but I am asking for a chance to do that. Will you come to a therapy session with me? I have already found someone who specializes in family systems. I considered his request carefully. Despite everything, I still loved him, and for the first time, he seemed to truly understand the problem and be willing to address it. One session, I agreed cautiously. We can start with that. The relief on his face was palpable. Thank you. 2 days later, we sat in Dr. Rivera's office, an elegantly appointed space with comfortable chairs and soft lighting. After introductions, she asked us to explain what brought us there. I let Derek go first, wanting to hear how he would frame the situation. To my surprise, he was unflinchingly honest about his mother's behavior, his enabling of it, and his failure to support me. I grew up believing that keeping Mom happy was everyone's responsibility, he explained. It was easier to go along with her demands than deal with the emotional fallout of challenging her. I never realized how toxic that pattern was until I saw it through Nadia's eyes, and even then I resisted acknowledging it. Dr. Rivera nodded. That is very common in families. with controlling members. The entire system adapts to accommodate the controllers' needs. When it was my turn, I described my experience of isolation and exclusion, the constant message that I was not truly part of the family. What I struggle with most, I admitted, is not knowing if Derek and I can move forward when his mother remains such a destructive force in our lives. That is a valid concern, Dr. Rivera acknowledged. Derek, are you willing to establish and maintain boundaries with your mother to protect your marriage? Yes, he said without hesitation. I have already started. We spent the rest of the session discussing specific boundaries and communication strategies. By the end, I felt cautiously optimistic. Derek seemed genuinely committed to change, and having a neutral third party validate my experiences was profoundly healing. A week later, Derek proposed a meeting with his parents at William's office, neutral territory away from Vivian's home turf. I agreed, though. Anxiety knotted my stomach as we rode the elevator to the top floor of the investment firm's building. William greeted us in the reception area, looking formal, but with a warmth in his eyes I had rarely seen before. Thank you both for coming, he said, leading us to a conference room where Vivian waited. She sat rigidly in her chair, perfectly groomed as always, but with an unfamiliar tension in her posture. She did not stand when we entered. Vivian, William said firmly, we agreed about how this meeting would proceed. With visible reluctance, she rose and extended her hand to me. Nadia, thank you for coming. The next hour was one of the most difficult of my life. Derek clearly outlined the changes necessary for us to maintain a relationship with his parents, particularly Vivian. These included treating me with respect at all times, acknowledging me as a full family member, and ceasing all attempts to undermine our marriage. If these boundaries are not respected, Derek concluded, we will limit our contact. That is not a threat, Mom. It is simply what needs to happen for my marriage to thrive. Vivian's face cycled through emotions: disbelief, anger, hurt, calculation. Finally, she settled on a controlled neutrality. I believe my actions have been misinterpreted, she began. Mom, Derek interrupted. We are not here to debate whether your behavior was hurtful. It was. The question is whether you can change it going forward. William placed his hand over Vivian's tingwind. We have discussed this extensively. Vivian, it is time to make a choice about what kind of relationship you want with our son and daughter-in-law. The term daughter-in-law hung in the air, a reminder of my legitimate place in the family that Vivian had tried so hard to deny. After a long silence, Vivian spoke. I would like to suggest family counseling. If there have been misunderstandings, perhaps a professional could help us communicate better. It was not an undecided apology, but it was a concession, a willingness to engage in a process that might lead to change. For Vivian, it was a significant step. Derek looked at me, leaving the decision in my hands. I thought about all we had been through, the hurt and betrayal, but also the possibility of healing. I think that could be helpful, I said finally, if everyone commits to the process honestly. As we left the meeting, Derek squeezed my hand. Thank you for giving this a chance. I know it was not easy. It is just a beginning, I cautioned. I know, he agreed, but it is a beginning I did not think was possible 3 weeks ago. Walking out of the building into the bright afternoon sunlight, I felt something I had not experienced in a long time. Hope. Not certainty, not complete trust, but hope. It was enough. For now, 6 months passed, bringing changes I could never have imagined on. That fateful night when I sat at Vivian's table with an empty plate. Spring had arrived in Connecticut trees, budding with new life that seemed to mirror the transformation in our family relationships. Derek had grown in ways that consistently surprised and moved me. The man who once silently allowed his mother to exclude me now stood firmly as my advocate. In our weekly therapy sessions, with Dr. Rivera, he had excavated the patterns of his childhood understanding, how they had shaped his responses to conflict, particularly with his mother. I was trained from birth to keep Mom happy at all costs, he explained during one session. Any disruption to her vision of how things should be resulted in emotional consequences for everyone. I learned to anticipate her needs smooth over problems before they reached her and never ever challenge her directly. Dr. Rivera helped him see how these coping mechanisms, while necessary in childhood, were destructive in his adult relationships. Your primary loyalty now belongs to your marriage, she reminded him. That requires a fundamental shift in your priorities. To his credit, Derek embraced this difficult work wholeheartedly. He established clear boundaries with Vivian, maintained them consistently, and supported me when family tensions arose, as they inevitably did. The family therapy sessions William had suggested actually materialized, though not without resistance from Vivian. Under the guidance of Dr. Winters, a therapist specializing in family systems, we began the messy, uncomfortable process of addressing decades of dysfunctional patterns. Dr. Winters said, during our third session, your behavior suggests a deep fear of abandonment. You try to control family relationships because you are afraid of losing your central role. Vivian bristled visibly. That is absurd. I simply maintain certain standards for our family. Standards that conveniently exclude anyone you perceive as a threat to your influence, William noted, with a gentleness that took some of the sting from his words. Over time, these difficult conversations began to yield insights. Vivian reluctantly revealed aspects of her own upbringing, her mother's conditional love, her father's emotional distance, and the pressure she felt to maintain a perfect facade at all costs. I was taught that appearances matter above all else, she admitted in our sixth session, that people would only value me if I represented something enviable. This did not excuse her behavior toward me, but it helped me understand its origins. The woman who seemed like an implacable enemy began to appear more human, damaged by her own past in ways that had rippled outward to affect everyone around her. Our personal lives evolved alongside these therapeutic interventions. Derek and I moved from Margot's apartment back to our own home, rebuilding our relationship day by day. We established new traditions, including hosting our own monthly family dinners, where everyone was genuinely welcome. These gatherings became a healing space for the extended family. Michael and Stephanie, freed from the constraint of Vivian's approval, shared more openly about their own struggles. Elaine, who had always competed for her mother's attention, relaxed into more authentic relationships with everyone, including me. Most surprisingly, William emerged from the shadow of decades of acquiescence to become a more active participant in family life. He began calling Derek regularly, not just about business, but to check in on our well-being. He invited me to lunch occasionally, asking thoughtful questions about my practice and sharing stories about his own early career challenges. I regret many things he told to me during one such lunch, but mostly, I regret not being brave enough to challenge the dynamics that hurt people I care about. I cannot get those years back, but I can do better now. Margot remained my steadfast ally through it all. I am so proud of you, she said often. Standing up for yourself changed not just your marriage but this entire family system. The most tangible evidence of our progress came 3 months after the infamous dinner, when Vivian invited us to their home for William's birthday. I entered the house with trepidation, memories of past humiliations fresh in my mind despite the therapeutic work we had done. But this time, something was different. Vivian greeted me with a stiff but sincere welcome. The dining table was different this time. My name card rested neatly in its place, the silverware aligned just for me. Even my wedding photo now hung proudly among the other family portraits in the living room. As we sat down, Vivian cleared her throat. I helped plan the menu, she said, almost awkward. There's salmon if you prefer it to the beef. It was a small gesture, insignificant to anyone else, but to me, it was monumental. From the woman who once handed me a plain salad while everyone else enjoyed steak, this was nothing short of remarkable. Thank you, I said, my voice steady. But life has a way of surprising us. Just as the air in the family seemed lighter, 2 faint pink lines appeared on a pregnancy test. Derek and I had always talked about children someday, but the timing felt like fate, unexpected, undeniable. When we shared the news, Vivian's reaction was a mirror of everything she was, part genuine joy, part calculation. A grandchild, she whispered, her smile tight. I'll prepare the guest room as a nursery for when you visit. Derek met my eyes across the table, silently reassuring me. Mom, we'll take it one step at a time. We'll decide together what works for our family. And for the first time, I truly believed him. The man who had once stayed silent while I was humiliated now stood as my shield. He would protect me, and our child, from the old wounds of this family. As my pregnancy progressed, I often thought back to that infamous night, the empty plate that had cut me so deeply. It had forced me to choose dignity over silence, to risk everything for respect. And that risk had changed not just me, but all of us. I learned that sometimes the hardest battles aren't fought with anger, but with boundaries. That real love isn't blind, it's protective. And that family isn't about bloodlines or last names, but about mutual respect and inclusion. Today, our family photo looks different. It's not perfect, but it's honest. There's William, finally present. Michael and Stephanie, freer. Elaine, softer, more real. Even Vivian, who still struggles, but now tries. And in the middle, there's Derek and me waiting for the newest member of our family. But here's the twist life saved for me. At our last family gathering, as laughter echoed around the table, I caught Vivian watching me, watching us. She raised her glass, and for the first time, she looked me directly in the eye. To Nadia, she said, her voice steady but trembling, the woman who saved this family from itself. The room froze. No one had ever heard those words from her lips, not even me. And in that stunned silence, I realized the truth. The empty plate that once marked my exclusion had become the very thing that gave me and all of us a seat at the table. So if you're listening right now, remember this. Your voice matters. Your place at the table matters. Stand up for it even when your hands shake. Because sometimes, the moment you refuse to be invisible, you change everything. And if this story touched you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who needs to hear. You deserve your place at the table.